thought in the zoning and planning area, a lot of attention should be made to, not, I don't know if you can do this, but encourage competitive businesses in the Circle or in Ellis Preserve, because you don't want, I'm just making this up, you don't want a Rita's in the Circle and a Dairy Queen in Ellis Preserve. I mean, they're essentially the same thing, right? So you want to try to simplify that.
Yeah,
Well, I would go Rita's or Dairy Queen, but I'm just saying,
Right.
Tuesdays and Thursdays, Rita, Monday and Wednesday, Dairy Queen. Come on.
So, the bridge might not be something that anybody would get to in the next year or two, but the zoning today could really encourage that 5 or 10 years from now.
Sure.
Well, you're going to do that, I think, a lot through your overlay. I mean, what's in the town center, the SU zone allows a lot bigger lot and a lot bigger development than what you might allow in an overlay for the St. Albans Circle, where you're going to restrict the size of the lot, the size of the business. So you get those smaller cutesy shops and things like that, you're not going to get in the town center, in the Ellis Preserve, I should say.
Linda, you had your hand up.
So I agree with what everybody said. And I just, 3 points or ideas. Do you think it might be worthwhile to create some sort of task force, or, we have the Greenways plan. I'm not sure that takes into consideration sidewalk connections, connecting some of these business districts through bike paths and walking paths for pedestrians. I know it's taking into consideration trails. So I'm wondering if we could try to enhance that plan in some way to create connections for pedestrians and bikers. And then 2, there is something called a complete streets policy or an ordinance. So maybe consider adopting a complete streets ordinance, which we'd have to look into what it all entails, but I think it encourages the township to consider all these connections in any development. And so it would be like an environmental protection ordinance or historic protection ordinance. It's another way we can make sure that all of these walkability, bikeability connections are incorporated in whatever changes and redevelopment. And then I think the third one in trying to talk about how do we manage some of that competition between the new town center and maybe the revitalization of the St. Albans, some of these unique shops that we don't want to lose. In the comprehensive plan, they talked about, years ago, maybe looking into creating is it called a business improvement district?
Yep.
Where, and Steve, if you know how that works, but I think what you do is you encourage those businesses to, and I don't know if the township could incentivize it some way, but you encourage those unique businesses to put in some funding each to enhance and redevelop so that they aren't lost. So if anybody knows more about that, but I think we should look into it.
Yeah, it real quick, it's actually even you can do it through taxation. If the businesses agree, you can actually place a tax on those businesses that's specifically used for that purpose. And so it becomes a township effort, but it's designed that way. And you can pass a ordinance for a business improvement district. I think it requires an 80% buy-in, but it can be done. Tina, you had your hand raised.
Yeah, one of the other things that's going to, that'll differentiate Ellis Preserve from St. Albans is rent. Ellis is an expensive proposition, and they are a big national developer, and they have thresholds they have to meet as far as rents. Where I think as St. Albans, if it's, I think once that becomes, once the things that we've talked about, Linda, you know, with this, these making it livelier, I think there'll be more, maybe some other demand instead of a vape shop. But I think in encouraging things like this, the things that Linda has spearheaded for St. Albans will help encourage smaller shops to come in. I think it's a feel and a vibe. And
Sure.
I think it's all about, I think that's how we can, one of the ways that nature is just going to take care of itself, so to speak, with that, because you're not going to have two competing kinds of tenants, I don't think. I think they're completely different. And there's a different audience for that. But the work that Linda has put together and the effort that she has done to spearhead this St. Albans task force that George and Steve and I have been pleased to be a part of is really very forward thinking on trying to help jumpstart St. Albans. So I just wanted to give Linda that that recognition that she's done a lot of work on that.
Thanks, Tina.
Good point. Thank you, Tina. I'm looking at our time, and I'm going to, if we have more thoughts here, we can add to them. I'm going to switch our conversation a little bit towards this idea of historic sites and recognizing, and that they're recognized and preserved. Any thoughts we have there about how we might try to accomplish that? And Tina, you had your hand up right away. So.
Yes. Leonard and I were approached by a member of the Historic Society, and they resurrected a ordinance, I think, John, that was presented in 2003 that was that didn't go anywhere. So they've asked us to review it and to have a conversation with them. And then we would, you know, figure out if this thing would have legs or not. So I think that it's an ordinance, and I think that the way that this works is to have the Historic Commission involved in this. So John and Ed, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that guy, because I believe that came through when I was on the board. So first of all, I think that our as far as recognizing, I mean, they have all the historic sites pretty much mapped, and we have a very active and very successful historic society. I mean, they do a lot for the township. So I think that's we're already pretty far progressed in this topic, as far as recognizing and preserving. The ordinance that was presented to the township, I think the issue with it was too restrictive. The perception was too restrictive on property owners.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And those pieces of it are what caused it to fail as far as getting some legs. So if we're going to look at that again, I think we should look and start out with looking at why it failed in the past, and look at how can we be have a historic preservation ordinance without being overly restrictive on
Mm-hmm.
landowners,
Of course.
property owners. I mean, because that's otherwise I don't think there was strong objection. That was the objection. That's why it failed.
I mean, we started talking about this about 2 years ago, and I asked then the Historical Society to, give us the ordinance again. Let's talk about it and let's go over it, because clearly most of the board was very supportive of this. But you're right, Ed. It did bog down in the fact that they wanted to specify what people could do with the interior of their historic homes, and I think we all felt on the board that no, we don't have any way even to police that, even if we wanted to do that. So,
Right.
we can perhaps, I think the discussions died at that point, and everybody moved on to different issues or different things of importance. So perhaps it's time that we start a discussion again with our historical society and see if we can, if they're willing, frankly, to live with striking those portions of that particular ordinance, so we can at least adopt something that helps further our historic mission. I mean, I got to say, I think we do a great job in this town of historic preservation. We've got a lot of historic sites. We have a very active group. We got a lot of them that are open and available to the general public. I don't think we're any slouch in the issue of historic preservation. Certainly there's more that we could do. There are properties that could be, I guess, saved. But again, we've got to come to agreement as to exactly what that means. I mean, I for one, I have no interest in telling somebody what they can do with the inside of their
Right.
property.
And they understand that now, John. So that's why we said we would talk to them. They understand how it failed.
Yeah,
So
let's.
Yeah.
If
So,
there's an ordinance out there, let's get it back on the table and see if we can hammer out something.
Yep.
Yeah, and really, I think that's that's the essence of this topic is really the adoption of an ordinance that helps to preserve without being overly restrictive, and otherwise the Historic Society is doing a fabulous job. I don't know if they need any more support from the township. I mean, they seem to be very complimentary of the support that they're getting. I don't know if there's any feedback, Steve, that they need additional support from us, but I think I would just focus on the ordinance and for this topic, unless there's something else that they put on the table.
I'd be inclined to get an ordinance done, and then if we have to, we can always tweak it in the future rather than continuing to put it off till we get it perfect. Let's get something done. Let's get something on the books there.
Yeah.
And if we have to, we'll come back and tweak it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Linda, you had your hand raised.
So one thing is with the zoning rewrite, I think we're proposing a spot historical preservation overlay of some sort, and what that will do in addition to the ordinance, I think that will add extra protections for some specific historic resources that maybe aren't identified right now. Because I think Delaware County has identified all of our historic sites, but they're just not as protected here. So I think that'll help. And then another thing is, just again, referring to the comprehensive plan from before, there's a mention of adaptive reuse. And I think that could be something to look at for the paper mill house, for the John West house, just considering other uses. If there's a threat to something in the townships, whatever the township owns, I don't know what we own aside from the paper mill house, but I think we should be open and allow for some other uses other than just a museum.
Linda, just a point of clarification. Don't ever use the word spot when discussing a zoning ordinance. It's just a bad idea because that just triggers lawsuits. So we stay away from using the word spot.
That's good to know. I didn't know that.
You have the right concept of what we're talking about related to the historic group, because they're spread out all over town, but it is going to be an overlay, but we're just not calling it spot.
It's not a spot district. It's an historic overlay district. Yes.
There you go.
So let's go ahead, and I'm getting note that the other group is kind of nearing the end. I'd like to spend a few minutes on the last item. Businesses and other buildings are well maintained and developed to present an inviting look to the township. And do we have any thoughts on what it would take to move us from where we are to what we would like to be? Maybe this is why the other group is wrapping up.
This is really something that's plagued us for as long as I've been on the board, that, you know, having a strategy around this.
I have no idea how you get a private business owner to spend money to fix their facade. I mean, if their business is functional and they're making money, or they're thinking they're making money, I don't know how you get them to spend even more money. Unless, you know, I guess these successful programs, you know, we call them that have, I'm familiar with in the past, there's always been some form of government money that's come with that. You know, if we want a business owner to improve his facade, then we have to come up with some type of loan, grant, or some other type of financial instrument to do that. But I don't even think that we have that that pool of money to do that with. I mean, I don't know how you incentivize an owner and say, hey, it would be nice if you turned your facade into this. You know, we can't really dictate how they spend their money on their business.
Yeah, when I was in Phoenixville, we did a lot of this. We went out and got a grant that helped with facade. And then what we did is we did a match. If the owner put in 10,000, we'd put in 10,000 kind of thing. And so it encouraged it. And what I found was that once you got the process started, there was a natural pressure on the other businesses to follow, just in that as businesses upgraded their facades, people commented about them, people wanted to be a part of going into those stores, and those that didn't struggled. And I even noticed the last time I was in Phoenixville a couple months ago, that the couple of the stores that had not done anything while I was there were now the fronts were being ripped off and redone, just because they weren't keeping up with what everybody else had done. And so it's not, I mean, and that's been 15 years, you know, in the making. So it's not something that happens overnight, but you can lay the foundations through a couple of things like that.
Well, we have an example of this right in the middle of the town, right? I mean, we have the new shops where the Whole Foods are, which is very inviting. And then as you move closer to the center of town, it's not so inviting, right?
Well,
so how do we solve that issue, right?
But you did have Acme Shopping Center.
Yeah, you had the Acme.
Yeah, and that's actually the natural pressure that came from BPG when they developed, you know, their shopping center. The Acme Center felt a lot of pressure, and they weren't as inviting, so that's why they took the steps to upgrade their facades.
Yeah, I understand, Andy, but you know, it's something in between the two that I'm looking at here. So I mean,
not that I want to do this for this particular developer that I think you're talking about, but you know, you can do it through doing Alerta. There's some mechanisms out there that help encourage developers to do those kind of things.
Yep. But that would be a huge, if there's a way to get you know, that strip to move forward, that would be a huge win for the township, because right now that's the eyesore of the township, right? And
Yeah.
it's certainly a challenge.
Sonia, you had your hand raised.
Yes, I was, again, I think it goes a little bit more back to the zoning. I think you're right. Some of these smaller businesses don't have the funds to just start changing the facades. But you could phase that in, you know, in 5 years, 10 years, you know, all the stores in these districts are going to have red roofs or something like that. And you can create those ordinances. And then as those businesses turn over, the new owners recognize that those are the costs that are going to come with buying that building or opening up a store, limiting how, you know, big the signage is, limiting it to just thinking, about some of the older sections in Newtown Square. Keep that older look to them, but upgrading it, you know, in something a little bit more attractive. But that would all come with, you know, notice in those ordinances that this is where the township is going.
Linda.
I know we got to wrap up, but yeah, I agree. I think that that would be where we would have, you know, going back to design guidelines with our zoning rewrite, which design guidelines are suggestions. So if you have design guidelines for businesses to improve their look, that within how we want to see this area, you'd have to incentivize them to implement them.
Right.
If you want to force them, I'm saying that nicely, if you want to require them, not suggest, you'd go with a form-based code. Form-based code, which I know we're not considering, but that would require any redevelopment that happens to be within the exact look and feel specifications for that area. So it would sort of, to Sonia's point, it would happen over time. It's just, how do you want to go about it? Do you want to require it, or do you want to suggest how we want something to look, and then you have to incentivize somehow? So we have to create those incentives, like Steve said, where you maybe create a match or some sort of other incentive.
Andy, correct me if I'm wrong, though, if we have it in an overlay, that can be a requirement, correct? Because I think if we leave it up to certain developers and making it a suggestion, it's not going to happen. So I think we'd have to really, well, we'll talk about this in the zoning rewrite, but I think it's a good thing for us to take back to that committee. Is to
Sure.
talk about that.
All right. Any other thoughts on this? I don't want to rush you, but at the same time, I know the other group is kind of ready for us.
Yep, I'm ready.
All right, so we'll head back over. I'll be there in a few minutes, but we'll head back over, okay?
Good.